Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Happy Mum, Happy Baby, the podcast. Today's guest is the co-founder and managing director of the company Musicalize. I did it so well before we started. Musicalize. It's not Musicalize, but it is actually quite, I would say, apt for this podcast. So let's just keep it there. He is also husband to Sophie and has a whole array of children ranging from 7 years old to just 12 days. I did give him a get out of jail free card if he didn't feel up to it today, but he's still here, thankfully. Today's guest is Ben Anderson, aka Diary of a Dad. Hello.
Hello. What an intro.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling really good, actually. Yeah, I didn't see your message giving me the get out of jail free card, but to be honest, it's actually really nice. I'm currently in our basement and it's the quietest that I think it's been in a very, very long time in our house.
Well, do you have, 2 or 3 of your kids at school?
3 are in school at the moment.
Okay.
Otis is upstairs, so he's 16 months old, and then Zaya's with Sophie, probably breastfeeding because that's all he pretty much does at the moment.
I mean, that's the joy, isn't it? Feed, sleep, poop.
Exactly.
Some pooping in there as well.
Although we are having trouble with the pooping department for the last 24, 48 hours. A little bit constipated, which wasn't ideal because we took him to a funeral yesterday and he was kind of grunting during the sermon, so I had to take him outside. That was a bit awkward.
Oh, bless him. It's funny, isn't it? So are you now at the point where you're still Googling everything? Because I think with my third, I was still Googling everything.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of, this is what I keep saying to people, that every time you have a child, something different happens. So I remember constipation a little bit further down the line, but at the point where you know that you can give them medication, and suddenly you've got a baby who's only 12 days old, and then you're like, can we actually give him anything? Or do we have to wait for the health visitor? Do we have to phone a GP? All of those sorts of things. So yeah, still very much still in the Googling stage.
Ben, what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Birmingham and...
You've still got a slight accent. It's a slight accent,
twinge,
isn't it?
yeah. It's a bit of a... People say that over the years, Sophie's beaten the Brummie accent out of me, but it does come through occasionally. So yeah, brought up in Birmingham, mom, dad, 2 younger sisters, and yeah, fairly standard, upbringing, really.
Did you ever look ahead to the future and see yourself with a family?
Absolutely not.
Really?
Yeah, like sometimes people just say that, oh, I always wanted to be a parent and I knew I always would be. Did not see that. It just wasn't something that I ever thought about. And interestingly, even when Sophie and I first got together, so we run our business together, I think, as you mentioned, and for us, the business was essentially the focus for the first couple of years.
Yeah.
And then we got married, and it was this whole thing of, we probably won't have kids for a few years. And I was basically thinking that over those few years, I would kind of get into the mindset of, wanting to become a parent, because I was very focused on the business and traveling and doing all of the things that we were doing there. And we had this conversation where we got married in the August, and because we weren't going to have kids, I reluctantly agreed that Sophie could get a Chihuahua, which when she went to go and collect it, turned into, we're actually getting 2 because there was an extra one that nobody else wanted. So she came home with 2 Chihuahuas. So that's in the September. And then we fell pregnant with Arlo in November.
No! Please tell me about that moment of finding out. How did Sophie tell you? Or were you just suspecting it and then did the test together?
No, so I didn't suspect. Basically, Sophie revealed it to me. We went up to the Lake District for a weekend and she told me. But I did kind of know because I'd noticed that she was feeling quite ill.
Yeah.
And I could tell in the car journey up there that she was trying not to be sick. But so in my head, I was going, is this travel sickness or is this something
Yeah.
else? And I didn't want to push her or quiz her about it, but she behind the scenes done all the tests and, you know, wanted to be certain. And then, yeah, when we got up to the Lake District, she gave me a present, and yeah, it was like, surprise.
And from someone who didn't know if kids were going to be in their future or kind of thought it was years down the line, how did you feel in that moment when you found out you were absolutely going to be a dad?
In that moment, it just made sense. Like something just clicked where I was suddenly like, I get it now. And, you know, it just brought in this whole other range of emotions and feelings that I didn't even know existed, because I wasn't preparing for them. And, you know, this wasn't, you know, a big plan to go and start trying for a baby and all of that sort of stuff. And I'm really glad it was like that, because, you know, I think maybe sometimes if we'd had that period of time where we were trying, you know, I don't know, maybe that would have confused the whole issue. So it was, I use the term organic quite a lot. It was just all of those feelings just came about really organically.
Yeah.
And looking back at it, I'm really glad that it went that way.
You know, how did you feel going towards the birth? Because I think as women, we kind of, it's one thing, and we know, you know, we know it's our body, but as a man, knowing that you're going to have to watch or be a part of that process and all of the things that are unknown and uncontrollable, how did you feel going into that?
It was a real baptism of fire actually with Arlo's birth, because Sophie was induced. So I remember us going into the hospital on the Friday evening, I think it was, to start the process of the induction, and he wasn't born until the Monday. We had this, just one of those crazy things. It was a really sort of, looking back at it now, knowing what we know, and even other doctors have sort of said he should have come out a lot earlier.
Oh, really?
You know, yeah, they were sort of saying, how was this allowed to sort of continue for so long? But fortunately, you know, it was, you know, he came, he was healthy, and it clearly didn't put us off having other children further down the line.
Absolutely. And can you remember what it was like meeting Arlo for the first time?
I was just a complete shock. You know, I knew from the first time that I held him that it was a different type of love that I was feeling, and just a real responsibility as well. I think something that stood out to me, that there was quite a lot going on externally with my family at the time. And I remember in the week leading up to him being born, my nan had passed away. And so it was like all of those, you know, all of these feelings just start coming out of nowhere, because, you know, I would have loved her to have met him. And, you know, then I was thinking obviously about attending a funeral and all of these sorts of things. So there was a lot going on. And I just remember, as I say, just that feeling of love for this little bundle. He was so peaceful. I remember like a few little cries, and then he just went silent, and then he just stared at me. And yeah, it was just amazing.
I love the fact that you used the word shock at the start as well, because I don't think anyone's ever said that, but it just reminded me of that feeling of going through labour. And even though that's what you know, that's what you're working towards, that suddenly there's a human in the room. There's that shock of, it is a shock, even though you know that that's happening, you know, what that feels like, what that is. It is a shock. I've never heard that word used before, but it's totally right.
It really was. And I remember first childbirth, we had, so I was in the room and Sophie's mum was in as well. And it was, again, I think that was a classic example of Sophie not knowing what to expect. And so feeling as though she would need her mum there.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so we kind of all experienced all of those early feelings together. I mean, her mum was really good in that she let us just do it. She was just a silent body in the corner.
Silent partner, there if you need her.
Yeah, exactly. And probably massively, I mean, I don't even think I've really spoken to her that much about what must have been going through her head, you know, literally witnessing her daughter, you know, sort of going through that. Sophie subsequently has said that she never wanted her mum in the room again. But I think that's more to do with just the fact that she knows she can handle it. Yeah. But also I think you want that as a pregnant woman, you just want the freedom to express yourself in whatever way you feel, you know, and so yeah, subsequent ones, we've done it all by
Well,
ourselves.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, though, how you think, what you think that experience is going to be. Like, I can remember watching like One Born Every Minute and someone taking in a bikini that she'd made to make sure she looked pretty. Or, I had like a nut and what to wrap yourself up. And then suddenly you're in the room and nothing matters. I do not care what is going on. Like, I can be naked. I can do whatever. I'm just going to do what I have to do to get the baby out. And I think if there is something that takes you out of that in some way, or I do think that subsequent births, you kind of strip away maybe the things that you don't necessarily need, or and I think when it comes to parents as well, it is that thing of wondering how they are coping or how they are feeling, because you suddenly realize you are their child still. So it's knowing that someone else is fearful for you in that room.
Exactly. And I think as well, we have to remember that the pregnancy, and it doesn't sort of end at the point of childbirth, as in the child coming out. There is still so, I mean, even something that, and I probably did hear this in the prenatal if I wasn't sleeping, about delivering the placenta, for example. Like Arlo's here, and then suddenly Sophie's still over on the bed, and this stage is happening, and then even after that, there's that just the recovery time that the mum needs, because I think you're right, we do see it on the TV programs where there's that dramatic entrance into the world with baby goes onto mum's chest, and it all sort of starts from there. But that, having been through this process a number of times now, it's not always the way.
No. Also, I love the fact that, the baby is born. That's a miracle. You've already gone, the body is amazing. And then suddenly the placenta comes out. And you're just like, what on earth? How? Like, it's a little marvel within itself.
Exactly. Just the timing of everything, the precision behind the way everything works. It's fascinating, really, isn't it?
It really is. What was it like going from 1 to 2 in terms of that juggle and still doing everything?
Yeah, I mean, that was more, we knew after having Arlo, we knew that we wanted to have more children, at least another child. And when you say
more, at least another, okay.
At least another.
Right.
It wasn't this. There was never a plan to have a huge family, I don't think.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know where this came, but
I don't know why I'm doing this. What have I done?
Why does it keep happening?
Well, we could look into that, Ben, if you want to. Yeah, if you want to know why.
I should probably do a couple of science lessons. But no, I remember having Arlo and then knowing, yes, we definitely want to have a sibling, but also knowing that we didn't want to ever get out of baby mode. And so, I think Sophie fell pregnant with Mila at 9 or 10 months after Arlo was born. So there's sort of like 17 months between them.
Yeah.
And, we just went from one baby to another, this time with a bit more experience behind us. Very different pregnancy. I think probably a slightly easier pregnancy. And yeah, it just all fell into place. And then there's this cycle where when Mila turned 10 months, we fell pregnant again. And then, Esme was born. So, literally kind of this 17-month age gap between sort of the older three.
And was there another conversation after the second to kind of go, shall we go again? Shall we keep expanding?
Because we just, things were good in terms of the business was in a good place at that point. We had the nice house, we had the space, sort of all the things that sometimes people start to think about practically as to whether they can. We didn't really face any of those issues. And so, and again, all of this, we can only say that this works because of, our setup and the way that we operate. Sophie's always said that, if I'd gone back to work, or, if we'd had to, put a child into childcare for us both to go back to work, we probably wouldn't have continued to have children. And so, we obviously, we just felt comfortable that we were in a good place to keep going. And I remember after having Esme, so we're now at 3, and you're just thinking, how big could this family actually get?
Becomes like a science experiment. Let's just see. Let's just see if we keep going.
You work out how many bedrooms you've got in the house, and you sort of start thinking, well, we're okay. And we obviously weren't against having any other children. And yeah, that's where it's so after Esme, we did fall pregnant again, and that's when we fell pregnant with the twins.
Yeah.
Which again, big shock. Now that's another big shock for us, because
But what was that like? Because all of a sudden you're feeling, you know what that you're probably feeling a bit like, I know what this is. We know,
Exactly.
we know what adding one child into the mix is like. So the idea of two, what did you fall off your chair in the scan?
Yeah, that was. I really wish I could go back and just capture. I wish there was like CCTV that I could see of our faces, because we were in shock that there were two, and just trying to it's weird, because whilst we'd mentally geared ourselves up to have a fourth child, suddenly at that point going to 5, 3 to 5 would have been a very, very crazy jump. And once the initial shock wore off, I think for us, it was kind of realizing that pregnancy was definitely going to be very different. 3 children. Sophie's now got 3 children.
Yeah.
And I always say this, after each subsequent child, obviously, she's going to be a bit more tired, or there's going to be just her body's feeling different. Yeah. And so while she's amazing, like literally my hero, I think physically her body had already gone through quite a lot at that point.
And 3 pregnancies quite close together as well.
Quite close together, yeah. And so, and you've now got this 4th one, and it's a multiple pregnancy, and this is again where you go to Google, don't you? Yeah. You start looking up all of these things, and you're planning ahead. But the early stages of the pregnancy were fine. We didn't have any real issues. Everything was doing what it needed to do. They were growing fine. It was all perfect. And then it just all kind of went a bit wrong around the 20-week mark, which was, looking back at it now, just one of the craziest thing that I think, we've sort of both been through.
And was something flagged up at the 20-week scan?
No, interestingly not. So basically, we'd been abroad the week of the 20-week scan. So Sophie couldn't have the 20-week scan. So when we got back, we'd been to Dubai, and when we got back, one of the first things that she did was went and had the scan. So the day of her 20-week scan, which is probably around 21 weeks, everything was completely fine. Like nothing flagged on that scan at all. When she left the hospital, I remember her calling me, and she was saying that she was sort of like feeling that, no, that was it. She'd done the 20-week scan in the morning, and then another follow-up with our obstetrician in the afternoon. Yeah. And then she called me, and she said that, she was feeling like just some weird like pain down below, and had struggled to sort of walk to the train station. But she sort of said, it wasn't enough of a pain for her to think, right, I need to go back to the hospital, just something very uncomfortable.
It's that weird thing as well, I imagine as well. Like, we all know that your muscles in your tummy are doing funny things. Like, twinges happen throughout pregnancies. Exactly. That you'll kind of be like, oh, what is that? And I imagine with with multiple children, it's probably, you can kind of go, well, that must be something stretching or...
And she's just had, 2 observations, and and we've just come back off holiday. Is it that she's doing too much? We didn't really know. So she manages to get home, but by the time she gets home, she's in a lot of pain at this point. And I remember her saying, I just need to go upstairs and lie down. And we somehow managed to I remember us getting through sort of like the bedtime routine with the older kids. And she said to me, though, that these pains are really intense. I'm going to go and try and have a bath. And then once she was done that, then I remember her WhatsApping me and saying, I think I'm in labor. Like, these pains feel like labor pains. And Sophie's not a dramatic character at all. She's got I think quite a good pain threshold. So when I saw that and she said that, I knew something wasn't quite right. And I remember going upstairs and just seeing her on the bed, and she was like, Ben, I really hope that I'm not in labor, but this does feel like it. So, we did the whole thing of calling an ambulance out. We literally phoned a friend from the school at the time who lived close, and we just said, we've got to go to hospital. Do you mind just coming to the house? Just the other kids were sleeping. Yeah. And she came around and just sat in the house with the kids, and we go off to hospital. And I could tell when the doctors came in and were examining her on the bed. Obviously, sort of paramedics aren't trained to do anything too much, but I could just see the looks on their faces. And I went downstairs and I just broke down. I remember our friend arriving, and I went down to let her in, and I just broke down because I knew something wasn't right. And I just remember saying, I hope they don't come. Like it's too early. We're not ready for them to come. And we go to hospital, and, you know, they do the examinations, and they say that it turns out that one of the twins, our son, it turns out the sac had started to rupture. And so she was losing water, but it hadn't like completely gone. And so we're in hospital now, and all sorts is racing through your mind. You know, one doctor basically told Sophie that, you know, these are labor pains and you are probably going to go into labor tonight. You are going to deliver. And at 21 plus whatever it was, there's nothing we can do. You know, they were very clinical and about that, because, you know, 24 weeks is the viability, or it certainly was at that point. And so, you know, they didn't want to raise, you know, get our hopes up or anything like that. And so hearing that was so strange, because every other time that we've been in the, you know, a childbirth situation, there's lots of love, there's lots of care. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they were being mean to us. It was just a very different type of conversation, because what they were saying to us is that the priority at that point was now Sophie. Right. Because they were saying that there could be complications where if she does go into labor, you know, she could develop sepsis, or, you know, there might be an infection. They were saying it was an infection that they felt might be causing this early onset of labor. Right. And so, we prepared to give birth that night. And at midnight, all the contractions just stopped. And, you know, we were like, what is going on? And the doctors were confused. We were confused. You run back to Google again. You start looking at, you know, I remember looking up, someone had said to me, or I'd read somewhere, that the waters can replenish on these like odd occasions. Right. And so literally that now becomes my hope. I'm sort of like, okay, so our son's waters, you know, have started to come down. But I remember putting on Instagram, because this was the other thing. Obviously, we had been very vocal. My Diary of a Dad page had started after Esme was born. So at this point, you know, there's already a bit of a community forming and everyone's aware. And, you know, we kept it secret that we were having twins for so long anyway, but now it's out there in the world. And, you know, I wanted to be honest about what was going on, because if we'd gone completely off the radar and then just announced it, I think it would have been really, really crazy. So I remember putting a post up and just saying that this is the situation that we're in at the moment. I was like, the son's waters have ruptured, but I believe that they're going to replenish. You know, we've got all this hope. You know, our daughter seems like she's fine. We're going to get through this. And Sophie was in hospital for 8 days with no activity. You know, we were having scans every day, basically. Heartbeats were still there. The water levels of our son they didn't replenish. They were significantly reducing. And they were very honest with us, you know, at some point you're going to go into labor. But now we're holding on to this 24-week hope, because you're sort of like,
if we can get there. Yeah.
If we can get there. And even that's crazy, because, you know, had we managed to get to 24 weeks, it would have been, that would have just been the start of something. We've just, with Zaya's birth, he spent a few days in the ICU, and we've been in the room now with a 24-week-old baby, and you look at them and you just know that baby is going to have a long road ahead of them. But that's what we were pinning our hopes on, and, you know, we thought we might get there. I don't know, you read those stories about those miracles, and I just kept thinking, we're going to be that.
Don't you? You have to. I imagine that's how you pull through those moments as well, is by clinging on to whatever hope is available to you.
Yeah, and the doctors, I remember, and the midwives, they kept saying to Sophie, how are you feeling? That they basically thought that she was hiding how she was feeling, because they were convinced that there was this infection in her that was going to turn at any point. And they thought that she was basically not telling them that because she didn't want them to know that she like maybe was feeling any labor pains or anything like that. But Sophie was genuinely as okay as you can be in that scenario. And then, as I say, 8 days later, I just remember labor starting again. And at that point, we knew that there was nothing, the doctors were like, there's nothing we can do to stop this happening now. We've just got to let it all happen. And that, for me, will be, I can't imagine I'm going to go through many crazier things in my life than witnessing that and having to deal with the aftermath of, them being born now at, so they were born at 22 plus something. Technically, our son came out stillborn, whereas our daughter was alive and breathing when she came out. And it was just a really, really horrible situation, because I remember Sophie, obviously she was on pain relief, and I remember when Cairo came out first, I remember looking at her and saying, do you know what's happened? And she was like, no, what's, and I was like, he's here.
Yeah.
It's happened. And then she very much felt, when I think her senses were just so heightened at that point. So at the point when Chloe was born, and it was crazy, because again, all of the attention medically now is on Sophie. Yep. Got to make sure that she's okay. She did go into septic shock, right, as they'd warned us. You've got very premature baby over here. My wife, who I think is going to die, over here. And I'm literally torn, I know that Chloe isn't going to survive this long term, but she's a baby, and I want to kind of give it was just a range of emotions. I mean, this is probably like the first time that I'm actually sort of talking really about.
Well, and I know that any post that you have said about it, you've said a certain amount, but also said that you don't want to be known for this, because it's not something that you are. I think you even might have used the phrase poster boy for it. You don't. And so. And I guess that is what this space is. It is for those honest conversations that are difficult. And however much you want to share, I would never push for more. No,
this feels really natural, sort of talking about it, because I think it's really important. It's a really important conversation to have. I don't think the conversation happens enough. I think we're getting better.
Yeah.
And once you go through something like this, Instagram is. I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram, don't we all? But I saw the very best of social media and Instagram when we went through this. The amount of messages that we were inundated with of people that were just rooting for us anyway, when they knew what was going on, right the way through to people who had been through something similar. There were ladies in hospital going through the same thing at the same time, and as far as they were concerned, they were the only woman in the world that was going through it. And then they go on Instagram, and then there's this family that are going through it at the same time. It was phenomenal. And I just saw a very different side of social media. I think the reason I mentioned about not wanting to really sort of like be defined by this experience was because we still had 3 healthy, happy children that we were going back to. And my heart, while we're going through the worst period and all of this grief and this pain, my heart was going out to the parents that were going through something like that on their first pregnancy.
Yeah. Because
I was thinking, how do you recover from that? Just that conversation of, are we going to try again? And now knowing the fear that comes with subsequent pregnancies after a loss, it was so weird, because and I think I did do a bit of this where, rather than reflecting too much on how I was feeling, I wanted to be almost like a sounding board for other people.
Yeah. It
was a very public, and that was by choice. We chose to tell the world what was going on because it felt like the right thing to do. But, I did want to be that sounding board for anyone else that was going through it. The amount of dads that, my Instagram following is, I think it's 92% female.
Right.
And so I was not used to getting messages from other dads, and suddenly there were messages from dads being like, "Oh, we went through this," or "I think my wife's going through something similar," and just being there as a support. And I'm always really careful as to what to say, because what is the right thing to say? What we went through and how we felt may not be the right thing. Well, it was right for us, but it might not be right for somebody else. And it's such a sensitive topic that I feel like I have something to say on it, but I certainly don't want to be deemed as like an expert
Yeah.
on,
But I think
all of
in
these
all
things.
these things, you know your experience, and that's where you always have to talk from. And I think I'm so grateful that these conversations are happening, because I think there's so much around baby loss that is unknown, because it's uncomfortable in the sense that we hope that no one has to go through it, but not talking about it doesn't stop people having to go through it, and I think, it's a shock when people find out that even in that loss where that's there is a woman who is going to have to give birth to that child, knowing the trauma and the loss that is it's going through that birth experience and not getting what you've been promised at the start of it, that heartache
Exactly.
that happens. And yeah, so I think the more we talk about it in many ways, the better, because it opens up that conversation, whether that's someone who's also going through it or someone who knows someone who's going through it, and just gets a little sense of what they're going through, and just knowing that sending them a heart emoji just to let them know that you're not wanting anything, not wanting to know how, not asking questions, just letting someone know that they're being thought of. I think it is so important these conversations happen, and I'm sure there are so many people that are grateful that you did share.
Well, I still get messages today from people who say that, my friend's gone through this. I'll get someone that will message me like, my friend lost their baby last night. What do I say to them? What advice? I don't want to overburden them. I don't want to, at the same time, I don't want to not talk to them, because I don't want them to feel alone. And, how much should I be saying? And obviously, as I say, every situation is different, and everyone's got to figure out, how much support they want at that time, or if they do just want to be left alone. And yeah, it's horrible. And the biggest eye opener for me in terms of how often this is happening, rather than in addition to, I should say, having those constant flow of messages of people that are experiencing it, is whenever we go to the cemetery where the twins are buried. I remember the plot where they were buried, and it was sort of like a new part of the cemetery that they're just over. It's called the Butterfly Garden, and we were one of the first in that particular year, or that particular summer, I think, to be in this plot. And when we go back now, the whole, I think they're going to have to go to another plot. Right. And do another bit. There are that many more that it's happened to, and you can see on the headstones just the ages of these children, and a lot are sort of pre-birth or sort of like full-time birth, and it's going on every day. It is happening every day, and it breaks my heart when I go on Instagram and I see that someone else has gone through it, and you just hope that they can get the comfort and the support that they need, because the support is available and it's out there. How much of that you take, I guess, is just down to the individual, really.
With Sophie going into shock, her body going into shock, were you able to have some time with the twins?
So it didn't happen straight away. I remember it, and also I remember how Sophie was feeling at that point. Yeah. It was very overwhelming for her, without being too crass. Yeah. A dead body being handed to you, in the case of our son, just didn't feel like the right thing for her in that moment. And so it was shortly afterwards that we were kind of given that time. And the thing I can't fault with the medical team was the sort of bereavement help that we got afterwards. And you get taken to a very separate room, and it's like the bereavement ward, and that's the time where you're in there alone together, and you have the opportunity to have them brought in whenever you wish. And that continues. We were able to go back to the hospital multiple times because of how quickly this all happened. We actually just went to our local hospital, right. Our local NHS hospital for that delivery, because our private doctor just said, look, there's nothing different that I can do that they won't be able to do locally. So we had that sort of local in the community team that were around us. And it did make things easier, actually, because that hospital, 5 minutes down the road, we were able to take multiple trips back and forth. And we were assigned a bereavement midwife who was amazing, and helped us through the whole process. But then it's just even, you come into the practicalities of arranging a funeral, and how do you do that? Who do you call for those sorts of things? And we want to be self-sufficient in that regard, but I don't know, that, as I say, that the medical and the bereavement support was there, but we did want to take a lot of ownership for that ourselves. So you still then have to figure out those things. But again, we had the most amazing experience there. I don't know if this is the case right across the board, but the funeral directors that we use, they don't charge for child burials. And there's obviously sort of like additions and things that you can add on if you wish, but that was just a nice thing to know that that wasn't an additional thing that we had to necessarily worry about. But I say this all the time, no parent should have to bury their kids, and unfortunately we've had to do it with two, and that was just such a horrible experience, really, and one that our decision was to do that privately. Literally Sophie, I, and a close friend were the only ones there for that. And I know that was, I've never spoken to family and friends about it. Everyone respected our decision. And I do, again, part of me was thinking, should I open this, should this be an open invitation for everyone? Because, people have lost grandchildren and, niece, nephew, and cousins, and all of this side of things. But for once, that was our time to be really selfish, if that's the even the right word for it. But selfish as in
put yourselves first.
We had to do we had to put ourselves first. And I know that Sophie, I remember from conversations with Sophie, she wanted to be able to express her grief on that day in a way that she knows she wouldn't have done if we'd had everybody there. And that was the kind of the deciding factor for us around, doing it privately. But, I think it could have looked like a very different funeral. That just knowing the amount, forget friends and family, just the family that we'd kind of built on Instagram, would have turned out in their droves for us, because they were just all, everyone was wanting to bend over backwards to do anything that they possibly could to get us through. But it definitely at the time felt like, the right decision just to have that. And it's a time that Sophie and I will obviously, we wish we'd never gone through it, but we will treasure that, that private moment that we were able to have.
And then after that, I mean, firstly, I imagine the twins, they're a unit who must always be a part of your life. And, I'm sure we speak to parents that talk about baby loss, and when you're asked how many children you have, that's a difficult question, because then do you open up that conversation? Do you just say 5, I've got 5, or
it is a really interesting one. Interestingly, I'm recording a podcast at the moment where I'm having sort of like some conversations with dads, and one of the guests that I've spoken to, he mentioned to me, he refers to himself as a father of 5, and he is including a lost child in that. I refer to myself as a dad of 5 now, because I think it's easier. Yes, technically it's 7, but I'm not always ready to have that conversation with someone.
And that is the thing, isn't it? Because if you say that, you then have to open up that conversation, and that's what makes it such a personal thing, and something that you have to take ownership of. It's your decision on what you say.
Do you know what I and this has only happened last week, I added Chloe and Cairo back into my Instagram bio. And I think that's Zaya being here and arriving. It was, and this is the thing, we have experienced, so we've now had 2 subsequent successful pregnancies after that.
Well, what was it like when Sophie got pregnant with Otis? And was that a conversation of, how do you know when you are ready to make that step?
I don't think you do know that you're ready. I remember Sophie saying, we obviously spoke about it, would we ever go on to have more children? The answer was yes. And Sophie always said that she knew that we had a lot more love to give. That was that was the best way. I thought it was such a nice description of it. we had more love to give. The love was always going to be there for the twins, but we knew that we had that capacity. And so falling pregnant with Otis was, you know, again, it wasn't a difficult thing. It wasn't, you know, we didn't try. It was, so again, I'm glad that we didn't have that level of stress. But when, you know, he came along, or that pregnancy, I remember personally struggling to connect.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is I didn't want to get my hopes up. That's, you know, I don't want to get my hopes up for come 16 weeks or 20 weeks, someone to tell, because suddenly now, you know, you've had 3 successful back-to-back pregnancies. And whilst I know that other people had losses, you know, we'd never experienced it ourselves. And so now we've gone through it. I'm thinking, well, there's nothing's guaranteed. And I still say this to this day, nothing is guaranteed until you've got a mum walking out of the hospital with the baby in her arms.
Yeah.
So many crazy stories that you hear happening. So if I'm honest, it became a thing of just getting through the weeks, you know, we've always done early scans, you know, doing that, doing a harmony test, you know, are there any abnormalities that we need to find out? We know we're having a boy from sort of like 11, 12 weeks or whatever it was, 12-week scan. We've got through that, 16-week, 20-week. Now we need to get to 24 weeks because 24 weeks is the viability period. It'll be okay if he comes after 24. Oh, actually, no, it won't be because there's still a lot that hasn't developed at that point. 30 weeks, 36, you know, all of these things. And you know, Sophie was heavily scanned. She had it. We were very unsure for a long time as to what had contributed to the loss of the twins. It turns out it was an incompetent cervix.
Right.
It wasn't this infection that they had, because what they remember doing was looking back at the blood work from when she first came in, and there was no infection present when she first came in, but it did develop while she was in hospital.
Right.
So, and again, we'd had all these theories around what had caused it. Was it because she'd gone in some dirty water when we were on holiday? And, you know, so it was good to get that peace of mind that it wasn't that. It was highly likely that it was this incompetent cervix. So she'd had a cervical stitch put in for Otis, which again, just another layer,
another procedure, another thing,
another procedure. You know, is it completely safe? You know, yes, we're having it done by one of the best doctors in the country, but every procedure has its risks. You know, Sophie constantly worrying about whether this stitch is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and, you know, having those regular scans to check. So I didn't connect with that pregnancy as much as I would have liked, if I'm being completely honest. And I know that must have been probably hard for Sophie to deal with at times. You know, I've always been that very active, you know, talking to the belly and, you know, using the name and all of those sorts of things. And I did struggle a lot with Otis. And I can't remember what the turning point was, but there was a point where I was like, right, okay, he's coming. I've got to be prepared for this. And obviously, I mean, you follow me on Instagram, you know the connection that I have with that boy. It's it's like we are joined at the hip almost now. So that, you know, that is obviously just an amazing relationship that we have. And
what was it like going into that birth, though?
I remember feeling in good hands.
Yep.
You know, obviously we're now, so after Arlo's not so perfect birth in the early days, we made the decision to go private for subsequent pregnancies. And so we're now in the same care of the obstetrician and the medical team that have delivered Myla and Esme. We're back in the same room, the same team again with Otis, and just feeling very comfortable about it. But as with kids, it was a bit of a curveball. You know, he didn't come out the plain sailing way. You know, what should have been a natural pregnancy ended up with an emergency C-section. I remember he got stuck in the birth canal, and it was something to do with his hand being in the way. His hand was on top of his head, and it was affecting everything. And I remember looking at the doctor's face and thinking, he normally looks like really poised. You know, we're normally joking between us, and he was very quiet, you know, very concentrated. And I'm thinking, is something going wrong? And, you know, Sophie had been trying to push for a long time. He wasn't moving. Then I remember him saying that he was going to try forceps. And the first attempt of forceps, Otis just put his arm through the forceps. And so I remember the doctor saying, I'm trying to pull them out, but I can't. His arm is stuck in the forceps. Then he came out and he was like, I'm going to try again. And Otis did exactly the same thing again. He's got a little scar on his arm from where the forceps sort of just pinched him. But our doctor said to us, I may have to leave the forceps in and take you down for a C-section.
Oh my goodness.
If this boy doesn't move his arm out. Fortunately, he did. But even then, going down to theatre, you know, I'm obviously now robed up and we're going down to theatre, and it was just, that was really scary, because for me, you associate theatre with, you know, I had real negative connotations around theatre, even though I've never been in that situation before. And I just remember a sea of midwives, doctors,
all
medical
of a sudden
staff.
there are just a lot of people around you.
The sheet goes up. You know, I always like to be at the bottom end. I've been at the bottom end for every birth at this stage, and now I'm this side of the sheet, just holding Sophie's hand. She's medicated, you know, can barely move. We're just looking at each other. It goes quiet at certain times. Obviously, there's this whole medical procedure. I said to Sophie, do you mind, can I go and have a look at what's going over the other side? And then I think it was our anaesthetist sort of said, just be here for Sophie, like just worry about this at the moment. And then, so then, you know, obviously we now know that we're having this C-section, and it was the craziest thing, not knowing what was going on the other side of this sheet, suddenly knowing that there was a baby. The anaesthetist, she was incredible, this lovely lady called Lindsay. I remember her saying to me, do you want to get a picture of this? I'll let you know when he's coming. So I'm there on my phone, and she's like, now he's coming. And I managed to, I literally just start snapping away, hitting and hoping, not knowing what's coming. And it's on my Instagram. You know, I now have what is probably one of the most amazing, people tell me this was on one of the most amazing sort of C-section pictures. Literally the moment that he comes out, you've got Sophie's face, his face, they're matching, they're pouting. It's just the relief in that moment was sensational.
I imagine that relief is on so many different levels as well. You know, knowing what had come before, then having a birth that has gone through many dips along the way. The relief must just be huge.
Yeah, huge relief, and you're suddenly like, right, we're here now. You know, 4 children that we've got at home, and you know they're all fit and they're all healthy. And you just start to, I suppose at that point, we did think, should we stop now?
Right.
Because we've been massively fortunate.
Yeah.
You know, we can't complain with our lot in life. And in my head, I just remember thinking that I planned to be, we had plans of having 5 children. That's what it would have been with the twins. So it wasn't this, oh, we've got to get to 5 children now. It wasn't like that. But like Sophie, that thing that she just kept saying about having that love to give, like I know that we've got that love to, and even though we've had Zaya now, I still genuinely believe that we've got even more love to give. But practically speaking, let me just put this out there now. I am pretty certain that we are done.
Really?
You I don't know. You reach a practical point, and you know, Zaya's pregnancy for us was one that didn't go without complication. You know, it was, you know, there were things along the way. One of the things that happened quite early on, I remember, was when they were measuring his femur bone, it always seemed to be quite far behind compared to the others.
Yeah. So
what do? You go to Google, you know, what should the femur length be at 12, 16 or whatever, and you find forums, and when you look at it, there are, you know, it's connected with certain abnormalities within pregnancies. And you know, one of the markers was Down syndrome that came. And you know, then you start thinking, right, okay, like, and this is just, I suppose, how my mind works, and I know Sophie's as well. You know, we would talk about this, just being like, okay, if that's the situation, this is now going to be a very different type of pregnancy. And, this is something that we're going to have to deal with. On the one hand, we've had this harmony test done at, sort of 10, 11 weeks, which has come back and shown that there are no abnormalities and nothing to be worried about. But Google's telling you this, and other pregnant women are saying that this is a thing. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 scans. It was every scan we were going to. This femur bone was significantly shorter. And I must admit, it wasn't until even in the final stages of pregnancy. So Sophie had, and this was just purely for her reassurance, a scan a few days before Zaya was born,
right?
Because we wanted to know, had this femur thing changed, and suddenly it was definitely nowhere near where it should have been on the chart, but it had grown. There was definite growth. And I must admit, when Zaya was born, like, that's what we're focusing on. We're looking and just being like, and we're like, this kid's just got normal legs. He's like, he's obviously tiny at the moment because, he's come a little bit ahead of schedule, but his legs look fine, and, and he looks fine, and he's, but then when he was born, they put him on the little table where they, sort of just, Sophie held him at first, they're wiping him down, but it became quite obvious that he hadn't really let out that big cry that they wanted.
Yeah.
He was whimpering, but there was not the big cry and the intake of breath.
Yeah.
The lungs just working and showing that they're working. And I think, there was a little bit of a delay because we didn't have all the neonatal staff in the room at the time. Someone had to go and get them.
Right.
And so then they wheel in, and the doctor's saying, what time was he born? Oh, he's now sort of like 8 minutes post-birth. And he's like, we would hope to be hearing a lot more. And then they get out this oxygen, and it's tiny. It's like this, we're talking about a 36-week baby, and they put it on, start giving him oxygen, and it's 100% oxygen. And I'm watching his chest just like up and down. He's really working really hard. And I'm saying to them, like, what are you expecting to see here? And they're saying, well, at 10, 15, 20 minutes post-birth, we would expect normally that he would be a lot more in control of the breathing. Shouldn't be on 100% oxygen, probably should be on 30. So they turn it down, seeing if anything's happening. The stats aren't going up. Sophie's at this point had a really bad reaction to the medication that she was on through pregnancy. So she is pretty much out of it.
Right.
She's throwing up, she's sick, and I think they're saying that they're going to have to take him down to the neonatal unit. Again, we've never had this. We've never been separated from our baby at the point of birth. We've always been able to enjoy that time together. And they say to me, oh, you can come. So I said, Sophie, do you mind if I go? I need to know what's happening with him. And so we go down, and for the first day, they were really struggling to get his breathing back under control. He was strapped to oxygen. He was having it, and that was scary because you're suddenly thinking, I'm now thinking, is this something that all premature babies go through? Right. Is this just a formality, or is something more serious going on here? Fortunately for Zaya, he did stabilize, fairly quickly. Then there was the fact that he had jaundice, and he was strapped to like a blue lamp, and one of the mats that he's on, and just even the fact that, so we've gone private, and so we're in the ward upstairs, but he's downstairs in the neonatal, and that's how we visit our child. COVID has happened now, and it's one parent at a time. It's just, this is why, when I think about it and I say maybe we're done, because we've gone through a lot. Sophie's gone through a hell of a lot physically. We've gone through a lot mentally. We've now got 5 healthy children who seem to be doing well and thriving. We definitely feel incredibly blessed, and maybe this is the time to just say we've got our family.
If you could write a letter on parenthood, on being a dad, who would it be to, and what would you say?
I thought about this a lot, and I think it would go to parents or dads that are going through the loss of a child. And that's really interesting, because as I said, I don't really want to be defined by the experience that we had, but I do believe that there's something to be said, and I have a lot to say in that space. And the thing that I would probably stress to the fathers that are going through that is to communicate.
Yeah.
And they will be very difficult conversations to have with your partner, with your friends, with your family, but have them anyway. There was a period of time I didn't really do that with Sophie, because we're both those types of people that, you know, this isn't something that we sort of sit down and have lengthy conversations about how we're feeling and stuff like that. We just get on with things. We've always done that. So there's been an element of suppression. But I also know that there was a period of time where, because Instagram was so busy and because there were all these messages, that virtual world became my focus, if that makes sense. And so any dad that I know that goes through this, I say the same thing: communicate, communicate, communicate. You know, talk about how you're feeling. It sounds cliche to say, you know, that you will get through, but you do. Whatever that looks like, you know. Do I think of my twins regularly? Yes. I've got their memory boxes in the top of my wardrobe, so I literally open the wardrobe and look at them every single day. I can't miss them. We've just gone through another childbirth, so it's at the forefront of, you know, they're always going to be at the forefront of my mind. But I'm dealing with that. The grief isn't overwhelming like it was at the beginning. I think very fondly of them, and, you know, the time that we had together was very precious and stuff like that. So that's what I mean when I say that, you know, they will get through this. And just to be open, as I say, you know, friends, family, your partner, just keep those conversations going. And whatever decisions you make off the back of it, do it together. You know, I can see how something like this can tear a family apart. Really? I genuinely can. Yeah. You know, because if you're not communicating, how will you ever know how the other person is feeling? You know, and if, you know, put yourself in the position of a partner who's not feeling loved or appreciated or whatever, because you've gone through something like this. I was talking to a friend about this, and we were saying that's where you can see that just other influences would come in.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not getting that attention from your partner, where would you go? Would you go looking for it elsewhere? You know, would that either intentionally or unintentionally? It's a reality, and it's just why I can't stress it enough to dads, because I think it took a while for me to get there.
Yeah.
But when I did, it was the best thing ever. And, you know, obviously we were having those conversations and we were communicating, because a lot of our thinking was around, would we ever go on to have subsequent children, which I'm incredibly glad that we did.
Thank you. We're going to finish with you finishing off 3 sentences.
Okay.
Being a dad means?
The world to me. It really does.
I love that. Since having children, I
have found myself. I was all over the place just prior to Arlo being born, striving to be successful in the music industry, dealing with some other family stuff that was going on externally at the time. Quite a selfish person in some respects. When Arlo arrived, like I said at the outset, everything just clicked and started to make sense.
And I'm happy when?
All the kids are around us, preferably somewhere hot, and we're just laughing and joking. That is, for me, you know, we love travel. I feel like my children are very different individuals when we're traveling and we're just in that, you know, in the sun, with that freedom for them to do whatever they want to do and just be kids. Just looking at them all and looking at Sophie and how we feel because of that. For me, that's my happy place.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking time to chat to me.
No.
It's 12 days in. 12 days in. I am in awe.
No, we are loving it. He's settled in, dealing with a little bit of sleep regression from Otis, but you know what? We now know that nothing lasts forever. So
Exactly.
I'm savoring these newborn moments. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to give him the biggest cuddle ever, and then start looking at the clock and going, right, we've got to go and start picking up the other kids from school later. And we've got after school clubs and swimming and all. Oh, it's Thursdays.
Get on top of all your organisation. That's what you've got to do. It's all fine.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.